All right, everybody, get ready, because today we're really going deep on this one. Sunday Adelaja, he's a pastor, went from, get this, childhood poverty in Nigeria to leading a megachurch.
Wow.
And helping hundreds in his congregation become millionaires.
Really?
Talked about his story.
Yeah.
So we got his book, Money Won't Make You Rich, and we're going to see what we can learn, right? Packed with personal anecdotes.
Yeah.
And, get this, biblical interpretations of wealth creation.
Interesting.
So right off the bat, what strikes me is the contrast, right?
Yeah.
Adelaja, he doesn't shy away from poverty. He really kind of hits you with it, right?
Right.
He opens the book with this comparison, a typical American family, they got all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Versus a family in rural Nigeria barely surviving, like almost nothing.
And that's one of the things that's most striking about this book, right out the gate. He doesn't shy away from those harsh realities, does he? He really paints this picture of this family in Nigeria struggling to just get by day to day.
Yeah, and you would think, right, that disparity, it would lead to this bleak outlook. But then Adelaja, he flips the script.
He does. He absolutely does. He makes this kind of radical argument that Christians, they shouldn't just accept poverty,
Okay.
He sees wealth as something that you can achieve.
Oh, interesting.
Expected even if you're living by, and this is key, what he calls God's principles.
Okay, God's principles, and this is where things get interesting, because this is starting to sound a little bit like, prosperity gospel.
It does, doesn't it?
Which is, a whole other can of worms. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with that term, break it down. What is prosperity gospel, and why is it so controversial?
Yeah, so prosperity gospel, and there's a lot of debate around this, of course, but in a nutshell, it's this idea that if you have enough faith, if you do good deeds, God's going to reward you with material wealth. And the critics, they say, hold on a minute, this is oversimplifying faith.
Yeah.
And not only that, this idea can be used to exploit vulnerable people, right?
Right.
But this is where Adelaja, he walks a fine line because he acknowledges the struggle is real.
Right.
Poverty exists, but he also suggests that by aligning yourself with God's will, you can open yourself up to financial abundance.
Oh, okay.
It's this interesting kind of, trying to find that balance.
It is interesting, right? It's like he's trying to bridge, the hard reality of money and the intangible, like, faith.
Yeah.
And it's not like Adelaja is some, nobody out there.
No.
This isn't some fringe idea.
Not at all.
Like, his endorsements, I was reading through them, kind of impressive.
They really are.
You got big-time pastors.
Yeah.
You even got a former U.S. president.
You've got Bill Clinton in there.
Yeah, praising his work.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
So clearly it's resonating with people. But the question is, right, is this, can anybody do this?
Right. Is it universal?
Or is there something specific about Adelaja's story or the context?
That's the question, isn't it? Is it for everyone?
Yeah.
Can anyone pick up this book and have the same results?
Right.
I mean, those are some big questions, aren't they?
Yeah, those are the million-dollar questions. But before we jump into the how, I kind of want to go back to Adelaja's core point, which is money's not the goal.
That's right.
He's very specific about that.
He is. He sees it more as a tool, like a resource. The real wealth, at least according to Adelaja, is in living out God's purpose for your life.
Right.
And that's the interesting part, right? The money, the financial success, that should just be a natural byproduct, a result of being in tune with that purpose.
Okay, and he doesn't mince words about this either, right?
No, he doesn't.
He calls out, he names names, criticizes other pastors who he thinks are focusing on, offerings, tithing, all that.
Yeah.
Just to get rich themselves.
He does. He's very critical of what he calls unbalanced prosperity gospel.
Oh, okay.
Where it's all about, me, I need to get mine.
Oh, I see.
And he wants to draw this line in the sand between that and what he's talking about, which is about the deeper journey, and maybe the wealth comes with it.
So it's less about, get rich and more about, get right, and then...
Yeah, and then see what happens.
See what happens.
Yeah.
I like that.
Aligning those actions with the beliefs.
And that's what I think is so compelling about Adelaja, right? It's not just theory.
Right.
This guy claims he made his first million in 9 months.
9 months.
And then he helps over 200 people in his church become millionaires.
Within 2 years.
Within 2 years.
And a lot of these people were, down on their luck before,
It's kind of incredible.
He really drives that point home throughout the book.
It's a bold claim. Does he back it up? That's the thing about Adelaja, right? He's not all talk. He lays out what he did,
Okay.
Gives you the steps. And that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive.
All right, so he's got our attention.
I think so.
Right. What's the how? What are the steps Adelaja says people need to take to align their, faith and their finances?
So he really leans on this idea of two pillars, mindset and then taking action. And it can be something as simple as saving money.
Okay.
He uses this example, right? Imagine you stop buying your daily cup of coffee.
Okay.
That small change over time with the magic of compound interest, that can grow into significant wealth.
So he's taking something as ethereal as faith and connecting it to personal finance 101.
Exactly. And he takes it even a step further. He talks a lot about real estate investment. Oh, yeah. He shares stories about how he and others in his church, they bought properties, they built wealth, even in a tough economy like post-Soviet Ukraine.
So this isn't just theory in a vacuum.
No.
He's saying this is how it works in the real world.
Absolutely.
Under tough conditions.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. Adelaja is all about learning,
Okay.
He's like, education, that's the key. He even tells people, listen to audiobooks on your commute. Listen to podcasts.
Sounds familiar.
Right. He's speaking our language.
So it's saving, investing, learning, but there's also this big focus on mindset,
Which
right?
huge.
Yeah.
He calls out what he calls the consumer mentality. Always buying, never getting ahead.
Yeah.
And he says, you got to be proactive.
Okay.
You got to have a can-do attitude. He's like, opportunities out there, you just got to look for it.
It's funny because you hear that a lot, outside of religious context too.
You do. It's true.
This idea that your mindset is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And then to prove his point, he tells those real-life stories from his church.
Right.
Like, the struggling pastor who becomes a millionaire, the 22-year-old student, same thing.
Yeah.
It's about showing that transformation is possible.
Right. So it's not just wishing for it, praying for it, please, money, fall from the sky.
Yeah.
You got to do the work.
You got to put in the effort, and you got to make choices every day that line up with where you want to go, both financially and spiritually, I think he's arguing.
So you're saying it's both. It's
Yeah.
both the practical and the...
I think so, yeah. It's
Yeah.
traditional financial advice is important. But Adelaja is saying you got to filter it through this lens of faith, this lens of serving something larger than yourself. It's about, sure, maybe getting rich, but it's more than that.
It's about aligning your actions with your beliefs, and then that's where the potential for wealth comes in.
Exactly. It's that connection that I think he's trying to make that a lot of people maybe miss.
It's really fascinating how he ties those together because usually those are seen as very separate.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure. You've got your spiritual side and your financial side.
Right.
And he's saying, no, they're connected. One can actually boost the other.
Right. And that's where I think it starts to get really interesting. He doesn't just stop at the practical, right, saving, investing, learning.
Right.
There's this whole other layer, this deeper, more spiritual element to what he's saying.
Absolutely. He wants us to really look at our own beliefs, those limiting beliefs,
Right.
and then try to see a bigger picture, what's actually possible. And that's something we're going to get into.
Okay, yeah, I want to hear more about that. So it sounds like he's saying this is about more than money. It's almost like a personal transformation.
It is, yeah. He's challenging us to look in the mirror and say, am I really living up to my full potential? And that's a question we can all ask ourselves, whether we're religious or not, right?
So we're talking about really shifting how we see things. It's not just about transactions, it's deeper, right? It's almost like Adelaja saying those financial struggles, they could be a sign of something else, like almost a spiritual rut.
Yeah, it's like a stagnation, right?
Yeah.
He makes this point, and it's kind of counterintuitive, that just being content, I'm okay, that can actually hold you back.
Really?
He thinks, and this is where the faith part comes in strong, he thinks God puts obstacles in our way on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like it forces us to lean on faith.
Okay.
And when we do that, that's when we grow. We discover what we're truly capable of. It's like, smooth seas don't make good sailors, right?
Well, I like that. So it's about taking those challenges, even if they're financial, and instead of being like, why me? It's, okay, what am I supposed to learn here?
That's it. And Adelaja's big thing is that each of us, we've got this unique calling. It's like our purpose, right?
Right.
And he says figuring that out, that's the key to really feeling fulfilled. Yeah. And of course, he ties it back. A lot of times that lines up with financial success too.
Right. But it's not the other way around. It's not chasing the money first.
No, it's about that purpose-driven life, and then the abundance, it just flows from that.
It's funny, I was reading about his grandmother.
Right. Yeah, what at her?
She had practically nothing, but she always saved a little bit.
Wow.
Even if it was just a tiny amount, she'd put it aside. And Adelaja says it was because she believed, like, by honoring God, even with a little, she was showing she trusted him to provide.
It's a powerful story, isn't it?
And guess what? Over time, she saved a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And then she used it to help other people.
It's like that saying, the more you give, the more you receive.
Right, exactly. And Adelaja, he's saying that's how faith and these financial principles, they can work together.
Yeah, it's about aligning them. When our actions match what we believe, even in little ways, that's when things start to change.
And he talks about how that abundance, it's not just about, like, hoarding money, right?
No, not at all.
It's about having enough to actually make a difference.
Exactly, to make a real impact.
Wow, that's pretty profound, right?
Mm.
It's not just about me, myself, and I. It's about leaving something behind, like a legacy.
That's a big idea, isn't it?
It is. And this is where I think Adelaja's message, it gets really different from all that get-rich-quick stuff.
Yeah, it's not about that at all, is it?
No, he wants us to completely rethink how we see money, how we see success.
In our whole role in the world, like, why are we even here?
It's about realizing we're all capable of so much more. He wants us to step outside our comfort zones, confront those limiting beliefs and go for it.
He does, and he uses those stories to really hammer that home.
Yeah.
Remember that story he tells about the woman who is just barely getting by as a street vendor?
Oh, yeah.
And then she starts applying Adelaja's principles, the faith, the hard work, the smart decisions with her money. And she ends up building this whole business, becomes a millionaire, starts employing people in her community. It's amazing.
So it's like proof that it's possible, but you got to do something.
Yeah, it's not some magic spell. You can't just read the book and expect it to happen.
And it's about putting it all into action.
Exactly. And, some people might think this is too out there, but you can't deny what Adelaja's seen.
Right.
He's witnessed this firsthand. People who are barely making ends meet are now experiencing real financial freedom.
That's got to be powerful to see.
And not just the money. Their faith is stronger. They're giving back to their communities. It's this whole transformation.
Makes you wonder, what could we achieve if we just, dreamed bigger?
Right. Imagine if we actually believed we could achieve those dreams.
Yeah, instead of getting stuck in those limitations.
It's about shifting that focus. Instead of always seeing what's scarce, start seeing the abundance all around you.
Oh, I like that.
And, you don't have to be religious to get something out of this.
True.
Adelaja's advice on saving, investing, building that positive mindset, those are things anyone can use.
Right. It always comes back to those actions matching up with our beliefs.
That's the core of it, I think. When those two things are in sync, that's when Adelaja believes we unlock that potential for a more fulfilling life.
And maybe even, a more prosperous one, too.
Yeah.
It's really making us think about how our spiritual and material lives, they're not actually separate.
Yeah, they're more connected than we realize, aren't they?
So Adelaja's story, his whole message, it's inspiring. It really makes you think. And whether you agree with everything, he definitely makes you look at wealth, purpose, all of it in a new way.
Absolutely. And while there's a lot to admire in Adelaja's teachings, we have to acknowledge that there are some criticisms and potential downsides to consider. It's crucial to approach these ideas with a balanced perspective.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, but there's always more to the story, right? So let's dig into some of those criticisms and maybe some of the potential pitfalls with Adelaja's philosophy and with the whole idea of prosperity gospel in general.
It's important to look at this from all angles, and that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in the excitement.
Right.
All these amazing stories, these big promises, but like you said, got to look at it critically. So what are some of the criticisms of Adelaja's approach and of this whole prosperity gospel idea?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that it can give people false hope,
Okay.
Not everyone who follows these principles is going to become a millionaire, right?
Right.
And saying that wealth is like a guaranteed outcome of faith, it's misleading.
Yeah.
It could even be hurtful, especially for people who are really struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, life is messy, right?
It is.
It's not just about faith and hard work. There are so many things that contribute to success or lack of it.
Exactly. There are systems in place. There are societal barriers. And let's be real, sometimes it's just luck, plain and simple.
Totally. And I could see how if you put all your eggs in that basket, if I just have enough faith, I'll be rich, and then it doesn't happen, you might start blaming yourself.
Exactly. You start to think, oh, I'm not praying hard enough, or maybe God's not happy with me.
Right. It's like you're not good enough.
And that's dangerous territory. We got to remember we're in control of our choices, our actions, but we can't control everything.
Exactly. It's not that simple.
And this leads to another big criticism, the potential for manipulation.
Okay.
There have been cases where leaders use this prosperity gospel to get rich themselves,
Oh.
They take advantage of people's faith.
So they're using the message to get rich, not actually helping others.
Exactly.
Although, Adelaja, he seems pretty against that, right?
He does. He calls those guys out.
Yeah. He criticizes pastors who he thinks are just in it for the money.
He's trying to draw that distinction.
Okay.
But still, it's a good reminder. You got to be careful. That line between genuine faith and someone trying to use you, it can be blurry.
That's a good point, yeah.
You always got to be thinking critically, using your best judgment.
So where does that leave us then? We've gone back and forth, right? Adelaja's ideas, they're inspiring, but there are these potential downsides. What's the takeaway for you?
For me, it's like Adelaja gives us a new way to think about things.
Okay.
Faith, purpose, money, how they all fit together. And what I really take away from it is no matter what you believe, aligning your actions with your beliefs, that's huge.
Right.
Having a positive outlook, looking for opportunities, those are good things no matter what.
Yeah, that resonates even if you're not religious.
Exactly.
Just going after what you want in life.
But at the same time, got to be realistic, right?
Yeah.
Money's not guaranteed just because you have faith. And there are people out there who will take advantage, so be careful.
It's like anything else. Take the good, leave the bad.
Right. Always got to be grounded, got to think for yourself.
Well, this has been a wild ride, this deep dive.
It has.
Adelaja's story, his ideas really makes you think. Wealth, purpose, what we're capable of, it's all connected somehow.
It is. And at the end of the day, you, the listener, you got to decide what it means for you. Do Adelaja's ideas resonate with you?
Right.
Do you want to try to apply any of these principles in your own life?
That's the beauty of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not telling anyone what to think. It's about asking questions, thinking critically, and then, making your own choices.
Exactly. And as we wrap up, I think it's worth leaving everyone with this one last quote.
Okay.
Can we really find true fulfillment, true abundance just from stuff outside ourselves? Or is there something deeper going on, something more internal that we need to tap into that's for you to decide?
That's something to think about.
Yeah.
And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive on Sunday Adelaja and his book, Money Won't Make You Rich. We'll be back next time with another fascinating deep dive. Until then, keep those minds open and those questions coming.